Okay, we are continuing with my audio version. We're on page 34 now. Again, just to kind of say, my pronunciations are completely horrific, but hopefully this will help you out if you like audio recordings. Okay, page 34. As can happen only in camp, Stepan Gorich had advised Vadushkin to describe himself as a medical assistant and had taken him on at the infirmary and taught him to make intravenous injections on ignorant prisoners to whose innocent minds it would never occur that Vadushkin wasn't a medical assistant at all. Vadushkin had been a university student of literature, arrested while he was in his second year. The doctor wanted him to write when in prison, but he'd been given no opportunity to write in freedom. The signal for the roll call was barely audible through the double-pane, frost-blurred windows. Zhukov heaved a sigh and stood up. He still had that feverish chill, but evidently he wouldn't be able to skip work. Vadushkin reached for the thermometer and read it. Neither one thing nor the other. 99.2. If it had been 100, it would have been clear to anyone. I can't exempt you. Stay behind at your own risk if you like. The doctor will examine you. If he considers you're ill, he'll exempt you. If he finds you fit, he won't. Then you'll be locked up. You better go back to work. Zhukov said nothing. He didn't even nod. Pulling his hat over his eyes, he walked out. How can you expect a man who's warm to understand a man who's cold? A cold stung. A murky fog wrapped itself around Zhukov and made him cough painfully. The temperature out there was negative 17 degrees. Zhukov's temperature was plus 99 degrees. The fight was on. He ran at a jog trot to his barracks. The whole parade ground was deserted. The camp looked empty. It was that brief moment of relaxation when, although everything has been decided, everyone is pretending to himself that there will be no march to work. The sentries sit in warm quarters, their sleepy heads propped against their rifles. It's not all milk and honey for them either, lounging on the watchtowers in such cold. The guards at the main gate tossed coal into the stove. The camp guards in the room smoked a last cigarette before searching the barracks. And the prisoners now, clad in all their rags, a rope around their waists, their faces bound from chin to eyes, with bits of cloth against the cold, lay on their bunks with their boots on, and waited, eyes shut, hearts a-quake, for their squad leader to yell, "Out you go!" The 104th were with the rest in the barrack 7, all except Pavlo, the deputy squad leader, who moved his lips as he totted something with a pencil, and Alosha, Zhukov's clean and tidy neighbor, who was reading from a notebook in which he had copied out half the New Testament. Zhukov ran headlong, but without making any noise, straight to Pavlo's bunk. Pavlo looked up. "So they didn't put you in the guardhouse, Ivan Denisovich?" "All right," he asked with a marked Ukrainian accent, rolling out the name and patriotic in the way West Ukrainians did even in prison. Picking up Zhukov's bread ration, he handed it to him. A spoonful of granulated sugar lay in a small mound on top of a bunk. Zhukov had no time to spare, but he answered properly. The deputy squad leader was one of the authorities and even more dependent on him than on the camp commandment. And though he was in a hurry, he sucked the sugar from the bread with his lips, licked it under his tongue as he put his foot on a support to climb up to make his bed, and took a look at his ration, weighing it in his hand and hastily calculating whether it reached the regulation 16 ounces. He had drawn many 1,000 of these rations in prisons and camps, and though he had never had an opportunity to weigh them on scales, and although being a man of timid nature, he knew no way of standing up for his rights, like every other prisoner had discovered long ago that honest weight was never to be found in the bread cutting. Okay, you should go ahead and do your sticky note summary for pages 34 and 35. No, really, you should go ahead and do it. Okay, page 36. There was a short wait in every ration. The only point was how short. So every day you took a look to soothe your soul. Today, maybe they haven't snitched any. He decided he was half an ounce short as he broke the bread in two. One half he stuck into the little clean pocket he had specially sewn under his jacket at the factory. They made jackets for prisoners without pockets. The other half, which he saved by going out at breakfast, he considered eating on the spot. But food gulped down is no food at all. It's wasted. It gives you no feeling of fullness. He started to put the bread into his locker, but again thought better of it. He recalled that 2 barracks orderlies had been beaten up for stealing. The barracks was a big place, like a public courtyard. And so, still clutching the hunk of bread, he drew his feet out of the valinki, deftly leaving inside them his foot rags and spoon, crawled barefoot up to his bunk, widened a little hole in the mattress, and there amidst the sawdust concealed his half ration. He pulled off his hat, drew out of it a needle and thread, hidden deeply, for they fingered the hats when they frisked you. Once a guard had pricked his finger and almost broken Zhukov's skull in his rage. Stitch, 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 and the little tear in the mattress was mended, with the bread concealed under it. Meanwhile, the sugar in his mouth had melted. Every nerve was strained to breaking point. At any moment, the roster guard would begin shouting at the door. Shukov's fingers worked fast, but his mind planning the next move worked faster. Alosha, the Baptist, was reading the Testament under his breath. Perhaps especially for Shukov, those fellows were fond of recruiting. If you suffer, it must not be for murder, theft, or sorcery, nor for infringing the rights of others. But if anyone suffers as a Christian, he should feel it no disgrace, but confess that name to the honor of God. Alosha was smart. He'd make a chink in the wall and hidden the little book in it, and had survived every search. With the same rapid movements as before, Shukov hung up his coat on a crossbeam and pulled what he wanted from under the mattress: a pair of mittens, a second pair of old foot rags, a length of rope, and a piece of cloth with tapes at each end. He smoothed the sawdust in the mattress. It was lumpy and dense, tucked in the blanket, arranged the pillow, and slid down onto his bare feet and started binding them with the rags, first with good ones, then on top with the torn. Then the Terran stood up and barked, "Sleep's over! 104th, out you go!" And at once the entire squad, drowsing or not, got up, yawned, and went to the door. Terran had been in for 19 years and never turned his men out for the roll call a moment too soon. When he said, "Out you go," he meant it. It meant you'd better. And while the men with heavy tread and tight lips walked into the corridor one by one, and then onto the porch, and the leader of the 20th, following Terran's example, called in turn, "Out you go." Shukov drew his Valenki over the double thickness of the foot rags, slipped his coat over his wadded jacket, and fastened a rope tightly around him. Leather belts had been removed from Zeks who had them. Leather belts weren't allowed in special camps. So Shukov managed to get everything done and to catch up with the last of his companions just as their numbered backs were passing through the door onto the porch. Looking rather bulky, for they had wrapped themselves up in every garment they possessed, the men shuffled diagonally toward the parade ground in single file, making no attempt to overtake one or another. The only sound was the crunch of their heavy tread on the snow. Okay, you should now do your sticky note summary for pages 36 and 37. No, really, pause this video and please do the sticky note summary. All right, I'm going to finish page 37 and we'll go on to the next 2 pages. It was still dark, though in the east, the sky was beginning to glow with a greenish tint. A light but piercing breeze came to meet them from the rising sun. There is nothing as bitter as this moment when you go out to the morning roll call in the dark, in the cold, with a hungry belly to face a whole day of work. You lose your tongue. You lose all desire to speak to anyone. A junior guard was rushing around the parade ground. "Well, Terran, how long do we have to wait for you? Late again?" Maybe Shukov might get scared of him, but not Terran. Oh no, he wouldn't waste breath on him in the cold, just stomped on in silence. And the squad followed him through the snow. Shuffle, 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 squeak, squeak. Terran must have greased them with that pound of salt pork, for the 104th had gone back to its old place in the column that could be seen from the neighboring squads. So one of the poor and stupider squads was sent to the socialist way of life settlement. Oh, it would be cruel there today, 17 degrees below zero and windy. No shelter, no fire. A squad leader needs a lot of salt pork to take to the planning department and to satisfy his own belly, too. Terran received no parcels, but he didn't go short of pork. No one in the squad who received any loss a moment taking him some as a gift. Otherwise, you would never survive. All right, did you guys pick up on that? So basically, right, the leaders of the camp have to be, if you don't want like the worst jobs possible, you need to bribe the leaders of the camp with like some sort of special food. All right, we'll keep going. The senior roster guard glanced at a small piece of board. You have one away on sick leave today, Terran. 23 present? 23, said Terran with a nod. Who was missing? Panteleva wasn't there, but surely he wasn't ill. And at once a whisper ran through the squad. Pantelev, that son of a bitch, was staying behind again. Oh no, he wasn't ill. The security boys were keeping him back. He'd be squealing on someone. Okay, so you pick up on that? Pantelev, right? In exchange for not really having to work as hard, he squeals on some of the other prisoners in the camp with him. He tells on them basically in exchange for not having to work as hard. Okay, let's keep going. He'd be squealing on someone. They would send for him during the day on the quiet and keep him for 2 or 3 hours. No one would see, no one would hear, and they'd fix it all up with medical authorities. The whole parade ground was black with coats as the squads drifted forward to be searched. Shukov remembered he wanted to have the numbers on his jacket touched up and elbowed his way through the crowd to the side. 2 or 3 prisoners stood waiting their turn with the artist. He joined them. They spelled nothing but trouble, those numbers. If they were distinct, the guards could identify you from any distance. But if you neglected to have them repainted in time, you'd be sure to land on the guardhouse for not taking care of your number. There were 3 artists in the camp. They painted pictures for the authorities free of charge. In addition, took turns appearing at roll call to touch up the numbers. Today it was the turn of the old man with the gray beard. When he painted the number on your hat with his brush in it, it was just like a priest anointing your brow. The old man painted on, blowing from time to time into his glove. It was a thin, knitted glove. His hand grew stiff with cold. He only just managed to paint the numbers. He touched up the S854 on Shukov's jacket, and Shukov, holding his rope belt in his hand and without bothering to pull his coat around him, very soon he'd be frisked, caught up with the squad. At once he noticed that his fellow squad member, Tazar, was smoking a cigarette, not a pipe. That meant he might be able to catch a smoke, but he didn't ask straight away. He looked quite close up to Tazar and, half turning, looked past him. He looked past him and seemed indifferent, but you noticed that after each puff, Tazar inhaled at rare intervals thoughtfully. A thin ring of glowing ash crept down the cigarette, reducing its length as it moved stealthily to the cigarette holder. All right, go ahead and do your sticky note summary for pages 30 and 39, and then you can go on to the last portion of the auto recording. God bless you and have a good day.